Hi, Suzy. Thank you so much for coming to meet me today.
And
How are
it's
you?
a joy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really well, thank you.
I'm really excited. Obviously, chartered psychologist, author. I believe you've got a new book that's out now.
Yes. Yeah, How to Be Selfish came out last week. Yeah.
Wonderful. And you've got a book launch. Is that right? Is that coming up?
Yes, tomorrow night.
Where is that?
In London.
London.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So talking a lot today around well-being, around self-worth.
Mm.
What makes so many people reach a point in life where they don't realize what they actually need?
Such a good question. I think there are lots of different threads to that. I would suggest that modern life can really distract us from actually noticing what's happening within, all these pinging notifications, decisions to be made, the volume of communication, just the sensory overload that we experience. I think so many of us are literally, we don't know what's happening, but it's much bigger than that. I think historically, if we take a look at how our needs have been met or not met, or how our emotions have been witnessed and validated or not, a lot of that messaging creates a feeling of that it's not okay for us to actually look inwards. And we need to unpick all of these different threads that we've been told about. We must be selfless. We can't be selfish. We must be productive, that our worth is somehow contingent upon how much we've got done. So many of these things make it really hard for us to look inwards. And the fact is, we can't know our needs until we've actually checked in with our bodies. So there's a real invitation here for people to come home to self, come home to the body, and allow ourselves to think and feel and need, because we're not machines. That's what makes us human, isn't it?
It is indeed. How would you advise that we do that? How do we take those first steps into changing that perspective?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I would suggest it's really helpful if we take a look at these unquestioned beliefs. So for people who are thinking, I don't know, these are the things that I hear often. It's not okay to rest. It's not okay to say no. It's not okay to lean on people. When you notice these barriers coming up, I would suggest let's hold that up to the light. What is the belief that I'm holding on to here? And actually, one, where have I heard that? Where has that come from? Is it true? And actually, does it serve me? Does it serve my relationships? Is this something that I have to keep believing in? Okay, so that's step one. Step two is then just allowing ourselves to embrace our humanity a little bit more. And I want to preface this whole conversation with an acknowledgement that that's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do. But I'm noticing, do you know what? We have both got a glass of water. Could we do a little practice?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah?
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
So this is how we actually do this stuff. This is how we connect with self. This is how we start to have a dialogue to get clear on what it is that we need. So let's grab our glass of water. Because hopefully this is something that you and me and everyone listening does on a regular basis. So one, it helps us remember, but two, there's something really beautiful about this practice. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to do it too, can we place our hand on our heart and just notice that with this gesture, what you're saying to yourself is that it's okay for me to feel as I do. And it's all right for me to turn my attention inwards. And all of that love and care that I extend to others, I can allow a little of that to be turned inwards as well. Okay. And hopefully that in itself feels nice. And then with the hand on heart gesture, just take a little sip of your water and notice how it feels. It's quite a pleasant sensation, right?
Yes.
What I'm hoping for anyone that tried that at home is that as soon as you take that sip with the hand on heart, it really opens us up to the sensory experience of drinking. You notice the temperature of what you're drinking, the taste, the sensation of it in your mouth, how it feels as you swallow it. And hopefully we also notice that it's rejuvenating, right? Let's take another little sip because it feels nice. Okay, now the ritual that I would love for everyone to do, let's pop our water down, but keep your hand on your heart. Okay, with this little ritual, there are 2 prompts. The first one is just ask yourself, where am I at? So what's happening? What's happening in my body, this body that I have today? What kind of emotional tones might be circulating? Where's my head at? And all of this we just observe without judgment. It just is, and it's okay. And then, based on those observations, the second prompt is, what do I need? And the answer to that could be super simple. It could be, where's the cat? I need to sit and just watch the cat breathe, sit with the cat on my lap for a couple of minutes. It might be, do you know what? I've been to the loo for a while. I need to get up and get out of my chair. It might be, I haven't seen the sunlight for a little while. It can be as simple as that. So that's the practice that I would love for people to do to really reconnect with self and to get clear on what it is that we need.
With obviously societal pressures and all the different things and the expectations, as you spoke about, how do you encourage people to maintain and continue on with that practice, to stay present in the moment?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think about, like, I don't expect people to care about these practices as such, but you care about what this facilitates. So I think whenever we can connect people with purpose, whenever we're clear on how this, brings us in the direction that we want to go, that's the stuff that galvanizes us. So I guess a place to start might be thinking about, if we refine it, think about one role that matters to you. It could be parent, could be partner, it could be something in business. Just think about one role, choose one, and think about how you want to show up in that role. And then your self-care is what facilitates that. And that, I think, really also helps to dial down guilt, because so often guilt gets in the way, doesn't it? But when we realize that this is how we resource ourselves to step up as we aspire to, well, we can take action even in the face of that guilt, can't we, Daniel?
You can indeed.
Yeah.
Why is it, do you think, that you talk about guilt and spoke about selfish versus selflessness?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that people who give the most feel the least worthy?
It's big, isn't it? Yeah. I think for a lot of people who have been reared to carefully manage the emotions of others because that was necessary for their own safety, will quite often perpetuate these relationships in adulthood. And I do think there's so much messaging that we've been marinating in since birth. Like even look at how we conceptualize a good child or a good baby. A good baby is one that doesn't cry, and a good child is one that doesn't talk back to adults. It's like we're sort of conditioned to believe that, for us to be worthy, we've got to be convenient and compliant and obedient and good. And so many of us are just striving to be that good human being. And then in more modern times, if you take a look at, there's such emphasis these days on resilience, on self-reliance, gratitude, even to a certain extent. And I would suggest that these concepts are fantastic in the right moments. However, if you're having a tough time and there's an emphasis on gratitude or an emphasis on, you look at how much suffering there is in the world. Well, I don't have a right to struggle. All of that makes it very hard for us to reach out and lean on others. And even to do the things that we know that we need to do for our own health and well-being, because, well, we've been told that we must be a good corporate citizen and, you've got to be present. You have to, it's endless, isn't it?
It's interesting because I always think about, in a really base format, that I've seen many times over the years when somebody's crying, it's our go-to instinct to say, don't cry. But actually, that in itself is just perpetuating what you're talking about. And why not cry? Actually, why not live in that emotion? Why not feel that feeling? I'm
so glad that you've mentioned that. I think that's really important. I think for a lot of us, we sort of associate emotional health with feeling happy. And it's a beautiful, beautiful urge that you would want to support and care for that person. But actually, you're absolutely right. If we can sit with them in that emotional expression, rather than rushing them back to happiness, that's a beautiful gift to be able to be with someone, to provide comfort without them feeling like I can't show up like this, or this is not okay. Yeah.
And in the same vein, why is doing something for ourselves? Why do we tell ourselves that that's a selfish act when it really isn't?
Mm-hmm. Mm. It goes back a long way. So I think it comes back to our conditioning. It comes back to so many things that we've been told in terms of we're so fearful of being seen as lazy, aren't we? I think more recently we've sort of messaging for the last 10 years has been it's all right to exercise, it's okay to eat well, but a lot of other practices are still deemed as somehow superfluous because we're just so busy striving to be this good human being. But, I think if there's anything that I've learnt, it's that my depletion serves no one and my replenishment serves everyone. So I think if we can look at these things as this is how we resource ourselves, self-care doesn't have to be something that's just shoehorned into Sunday morning. It's not something that you can only do it when you've cleared your to-do list, or you can only attend to self when you've met the needs of everybody else. This is how you resource yourself to do all of those other things. It's like saying to yourself, it's like saying to your car, you've got to get me to point B, but I'll fill you up at the end. The car needs petrol to go. That's what we need to be able to function. So I'm hoping that this conversation is going to help people think, actually, I don't have to keep believing that. I can choose differently. And it's actually not a transgression of my values. It's a thing that actually allows me to live a more honest and true expression of them.
And certain people are going to take value from this today and from everything that you're sharing. Certainly, even just in the short space of time that we've got to get to know each other, I'm taking lots of things away with me.
I'm glad to hear it.
Where does that feeling of not being enough, where does that come from?
Okay. I think, if you just look at how emotions are talked about, I don't know, I'm sure you'll have heard the conceptualization of there are positive emotions and there are negative emotions. But the fact is we need our emotions. We need every emotion. They all serve an evolutionary purpose. So the fact that we're second guessing ourselves, thinking, okay, this is positive, good, that means I can have it. Negative, bad, does that mean I can't have it? Yeah, I don't think that we've been reared to understand that it's okay for us to feel all of our feelings. And in terms of the expression of human needs, again, coming back to this place of we're told that we must be a selfless individual. We're also told that we must, you've got to be there and you've got to be present, you've got to strive. How do we feel about meeting our own needs? It doesn't feel like it's okay, does it? Yeah. But how sustainable is it? Yeah. They're not nice to have. They're human needs. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we seem to forget about them far too often. I know a few people in my life that would love the answer to this question. So what is it about growing up that is instilled in us that saying no is not okay?
Well, good God, doesn't talk back to adults, does it? It's like, we've got to toe the line. You just even look at the nature of the school system. The fact that, children are rewarded for attendance. I find that really problematic.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that if you need to take time off because you have an illness, an injury, some kind of bereavement, some kind of conflict, how is it that that's not okay? Yeah, the kids miss out on the attendance award. There are kids, they don't get to go on the school trip, or they miss out on the pizza lunch. They've already had the punishment of those things that they've had to weather. Yeah, it makes us feel like, you've got to show up and strive all the time. Yeah, it's insidious. It's in literally all layers of modern messaging, from how we rear kids, the school system, overemphasis on resilience, gratitude. I think that's why we struggle so much with our humanity.
And all of these things, I suppose, lead to things like we see a lot more often these days, chronic stress.
Yeah.
How does chronic stress affect overall emotional and physical well-being?
Do you know, it shows up in so many different ways. And I would suggest that it's really helpful for people to ask this of themselves. How does their stress manifest? So for some people, it might show up in the physical body, whether that's tension, whether that's pain, headaches, muscular conditions, but it could also show up in the quality of our thinking, whether that's anxious thinking, overthinking, catastrophic thinking. It'll show up in our emotions as well. So perhaps we might feel a sense of numbing. Maybe we might feel quite reactive. Could show up in teariness. Maybe it's a propensity to anger. It'll manifest too in our energy levels and in our immune health. So it might be lingering ailments or one thing after another. Sleep can also be affected. And I would suggest sometimes our choices themselves can be really useful warning signs. I certainly know that if I'm literally going from Instagram to WhatsApp to Gmail to, that's when I'm like, I'm feeling stressed here. I need to back up. Or maybe it's a reliance on caffeine, sugar, alcohol to get us through our day. So there are lots of different warning signs, and it can manifest in all sorts of different ways. And it's important for us to, I would suggest, quite often people think their early warning signs are enough. I would suggest that quite often those early warning signs are actually late warning signs, and we need to back up the truck even further and just look for things like, when you're just feeling a little bit out of sorts, or you're feeling perhaps it's harder to make decisions, or let's not wait for illness, injury, and conflict for us to take action. We need to take action at the whisper rather than the shout.
I think it's again where the narrative has changed, isn't it? Because actually stress is almost seen as an acceptance of life these days. And I'll know people who will say I thrive on stress, but actually
it's a badge of honor.
Do they really? A badge of honor, exactly. Yeah. How would you advise people to help change the narrative or mindset around that?
I think it's really problematic. Even if you look at the definition of burnout, I think we've been gaslit. So the definition of burnout is stress improperly managed. Now, for anyone that's experienced workplace burnout, they're going to look at that and go, what are you saying here? Are you saying that I should have managed my workload better? Are you saying to me that I haven't been diligent enough with my self-care? Because I think this is the kind of bind that we're stuck in. We're taught, don't be selfish. You must be selfless. You must be resilient. But it's also not okay to look after yourself. And it's like, well, we can't have it both ways. So this is why we've got to see the impossible bind that we're in. If you want us to be resilient human beings, you're going to have to allow me to pace myself compassionately. Yeah. Which is it's a challenge, isn't it?
It is a challenge. I remember many years ago, actually, first hearing the term burnout, because I know it is talked about a lot within the medical industry, and people get into burnout point.
Yeah.
And but even back then, I thought to myself, well, how can people get to that? How can people allow themselves to? But then as I've grown, I've started to see all the little indicators of how it happens, and indeed, that's not a slight on that individual.
No.
For getting into that position, it's certainly not something that should be perceived as negative.
Yeah. No, I work with a lot of carers, a lot of educators, and what I'm seeing is that in modern times, we're trying to streamline this, and there's this process for this, and there's this kind of, you've got to fill in this form. And for so many people, their work is delivering what's required of their job. They could fit that into their normal workday, but then they've got to do all the planning, all the preparation, all of the communication outside of that. And for people that are chronic people pleasers, right, it can be very hard for them to carve those boundaries. And no wonder we wind up feeling burnt out and overwhelmed. It's very hard to carve that compassionate pace. And especially when so many of us are sort of, I've only had 4 hours. Richard Branson only gets 4 hours of sleep, so that'll do me. There's this real sort of badge of honor in shellacking ourselves. But yeah, coming back to that question of how sustainable it is, I certainly know it's not. And a lot of my work is informed by my own experience of energetic bankruptcy. And I tell you what, psychologist, yoga teacher, personal trainer, look at the toolkit that I had. But I would suggest that there are some life experiences. Like for me, I became a mum at the same time as losing my dad to motor neurone disease. It doesn't matter what toolkit you have. Life is sometimes going to knock you for six. And I think it's really important that we clarify what resilience is. Resilience doesn't mean that we're unaffected by life. We're still going to get knocked for six, but resilience just means that we get back up, and perhaps we get back up sooner. So I think that's a really important part of the dialogue, because I think a lot of people sort of they equate coping with thriving. Actually, no, coping is like, it's all right to be doing the bare minimum. That's actually coping. And resilience doesn't look like this shiny steam train that like never stops. It's all right to pause. It's all right to slow down. It's all right to wave the white flag and say, do you know what? I can't just keep pitching up and showing up as I have, because there is this thing happening in my life and my needs have changed and I need to receive support here. Yeah.
I always think it's okay to not always be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. It's so important. You go back to that positive and negative emotions. No. All our emotions have a purpose and it's all right to feel. And in fact, sometimes it's the expression of those feelings that actually allows us to heal. And if we're not allowing ourselves to feel, that can derail the healing journey.
And in terms of those people, as you said, chronic people pleasers, where do you think that stems from?
I would suggest quite often it stems from if you've had to keep your parents pleased and content for life to be smooth for you, then quite often that's the origin. It can stem from perfectionism, and not just early childhood. You know, there might be relationships in adulthood that have carved a sense of, it's for me to be safe. This is what I need to do. Yeah, so it keeps coming back to how our needs have been met and how our emotions have been validated. And I would suggest that even people looking back on what they think of as a fairly normal childhood and a fairly happy childhood might still have some of these elements of our needs being unmet. Not because our parents weren't loving, but I think just in the last 20 years, we've learnt an awful lot about mental and emotional health. I don't think we were reared with this understanding. And I'll be the first to say, I'm the daughter of a psychiatrist, and he was a very present, loving man. But I don't know how many conversations we had about our emotional life, because this is fairly new knowledge. So this is not about, necessarily demonizing parenting. This is just about acknowledging what we're learning about what it means to be human and what we all need to feel whole and healthy.
What advice would you give to somebody who wants to start to take those steps into reconnecting with those emotions, those feelings with themselves?
Mm-hmm. I think we need to get deliberate about carving time and space for it. And the beautiful thing is how that looks for each individual might be totally different. Now, that's why I've written 10 books, because different things for different people. So for some people, it might be a movement practice because that brings them home to their body. For other people, it might be some kind of breathing ritual, or it might be they enjoy cooking or some creative pursuit, or, some kind of reflective practice. So I would encourage people, and this might be, I don't know, a little revolutionary. I would love for them to indulge their pleasures.
Mm-hmm.
What brings you joy? Yeah, look at how pleasure's being demonized. Oh, that's indulgent, isn't it? But we need pleasure to be able to heal. When we experience pleasure, when we experience contentment and joy, it shifts us out of the stress response and brings us into rest and digest mode. We need to be in rest and digest mode to be able to heal. We also need to be in rest and digest mode for us to be able to delay gratification, and for us to empathize with other people, and for us to be able to take action in service of our values. So I would love to invite people to think about what brings you joy. Seek a little pleasure. And let that bring you home to self, and feel how that resources you, and see that not only benefiting you, but everyone your life touches.
And moving on from that, then, when you do start to reconnect with oneself, what impact does that have on relationships?
Oh, that is such a good question. Okay, now quite often we say to ourselves, I must be self-reliant. I shouldn't burden others. They've got this going on. I couldn't possibly, that's going to add to their burden, right? I've had an experience this year where a really good friend of mine effectively did a disappearing act. And I kept reaching out and I kept being told, no, everything's fine. It got to the point where I thought, I think she doesn't want to be my friend anymore. And I found it really painful. And then, of course, months later, it transpired that there was a huge event that she didn't feel that she could share. We've healed that rupture, but this is the thing. And it was a really big learning curve for me. We feel like we've got to shoulder our burden alone. But our loved ones, for us to be safe and healthy in relationship with each other, they want to feel trusted. They want to feel needed. And if they're aware that something's going on, they also want to be of service. And actually, when we withhold that, it can really damage relationships. It can make them feel like they're surplus to requirements or that they're not valued. So by being more transparent with each other, by showing up more honestly, by being more honest about our needs and more, honest about our feelings, we actually deepen our bonds. And we also invite them to show up more authentically. So for us, kind of managing this perception of self as I'm self-contained, I don't need anyone, I'm good, thanks. How can we ever connect authentically with anybody else? Because it's like this mask interacting with this mask. So we don't just need this, our self-care, for our own health and well-being. We actually need reciprocity. We need to extend care to others, and we need to receive care from others for the health of our relationships. And I hope that can be really galvanizing for people, because sometimes we can't do it for us at first. And I tell you what, if you can't do it for you straight away, please do it for those you love. It's a beautiful win-win.
It's a really nice way to look at it, and actually something I'm really taking on board, because I very much so my whole life I can remember I'm about giving to others.
Yeah.
But then when I need something, I'm the worst person at opening up and saying I need something.
Yeah.
So if you were to give me like one word of advice or one sentence of advice to take that first step into that, what would that look like?
Okay. Think about how good you feel when you've given to someone. Don't rob anyone else of that feeling. Yeah? Because It feels really good, doesn't it?
Yes.
You feel good about life. You feel good about yourself. Allow someone else to have that gift. Yeah? It's really important.
Why do we fear being seen as needy?
I think it's got really ancient roots. Like when you look at humanity, when we were like living in hunter-gatherer tribes, the degree to which we're accepted is like the degree to which you are a contributing member of society. Yeah. So if you're taking more than you give, there would have been a risk of you being ostracized. Now, clearly we don't live in a hunter-gatherer community anymore, but there is still, it's anchored in our DNA. Yeah. Perhaps there are also religious beliefs that get woven in here. I can remember some of the prayers, like reciting some of those prayers as a kid, like, we're not worthy so much as to gather up the crumbs from under your table. And I can remember as a kid thinking, what have we done that's so horrendous? And how can I cleanse myself? So there are lots of different threads to this, as well as some of those other modern threads that we've talked about. But let's come back to the definition here, a human need. This is not a human luxury. This is a human need. And I think we understand that we've got to feed ourselves. We need hydration, don't we? I think it's commonly accepted that, yes, we need to move our bodies. But I think we need to broaden it. For us to feel healthy, we also need to be understood. We need to be accepted. We need a sense of belonging. We need to be cared for. These are all human needs. Not nice to have, a human need.
How would you start to rebuild the trust for yourself when you perhaps have had a lifetime of ignoring your needs?
It's a really good question. I think the precursor to trust is knowing yourself. So that's why this hand-on-heart gesture is really important. I think the more in tune we get with ourselves, and you do that on a regular basis, there's a sense of consistency. There's a sense of, this is how I feel. If I'm poorly slept, this is how I feel. Oh, okay. So if there's some kind of conflict, this is how I respond to that. The more we know ourselves, the more that we can trust what it is that we need, but also trust how it is that we respond. So it comes back to connecting with self and practicing, voicing these needs. I think that's really important. So we've canvassed how important it is that we want to be loving, caring human beings. We want to keep taking care of other people. We've talked about how it's okay for us to care for ourselves, even though a lot of our modern messaging would suggest otherwise. We know that it's all right for us to care for self. But there's also, I think the next step is allowing ourselves to receive from others. But if there's been a history of disappointment, I think we need to choose very carefully where we practice these skills of self-advocacy. So I would suggest if anyone is looking to develop these skills, if you can identify someone in your circle that you know has your best interests at heart, then you practice with them first. You get brave and you say, this is how I'm feeling. Would it be possible for you to support me in this way? And then even there's a dialogue, isn't there? Because sometimes we might ask things of people and perhaps they don't have capacity. But let's understand that capacity doesn't mean that they don't care. It might mean that they can't do that thing for us right now, or they can't do that for us right now, but they could do this. So this is where we have a dialogue and we see what's possible. But people aren't mind readers. So we do have to become skilled in speaking up to allow that reciprocity to flow in our relationships.
As a final thought, what would you say to somebody who has spent their whole life putting others first?
I would say thank you so much for your beautiful heart. And I think you can be incredibly proud of the love and care that you bring to this world. But I'd also suggest that it's okay for you to broaden your values of kindness and care and generosity and compassion. Also allow them to include you, because that is not a transgression of your values. That's actually a more complete expressionism. And it is perfectly okay for you to start living like you matter too.
Suzy, thank you so much. Absolute privilege to meet you, and I've loved hearing your words of wisdom, advice, and thank you for sharing as well some of the experiences you've had in your own life that have brought you here today.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.